Hello, welcome to Thor Talk, the show all about Marvel's resident God of Thunder. On this episode of Thor Talk, Thor goes to confront the Minotaur, but something is very wrong. He's starting to lose his wits, his mind is getting slower, and he cannot fight as quickly. But it seems the Executioner is stronger than ever, and he's joined by Amora the Enchantress. This terrible duo will do whatever they can to save Thor, but what if doing so changes him beyond recognition? We'll see if Thor can retain his wits on Thor Talk.
I am Thor the Thunderer, son of Odin, prince of Asgard, and this world is under my protection.
The Immortal Thor number 9 was written by Al Ewing and was published in April of 2024. The issue begins with a stanza from A Shropshire Lad by A.E. Houseman and reads as follows. That is the land of the lost content. I see it shining plain, the happy highways where I went, and cannot come again. The stanza is from The Land of Lost Content, the 40th poem in a 63-poem collection, A Shropshire Lad. The land of lost content described in the poem is the land the narrator is originally from. It's in the English countryside and is described as having blue remembered hills, spires, and farms. The narrator yearns for this land with a sense of nostalgia and sadness. Content and content are homographs, and Houseman plays on this. The content of the land would be the memories and experiences that the narrator had there. The content of the land is the sense of fulfillment the narrator had when they were there. The content is lost because the narrator cannot come again to experience those memories a second time. And because of that, the contentment from those experiences is also lost. Ewing chose the title of the poem as the title of this issue. He also has Dario Agger use the same double meaning of the words content and content that is found in the poem. In the context of the story, the land of lost content is Thor as we know him and his history. The content, the stories upon stories of this noble god who once acted with humility and wisdom, is no more. It's lost. Now Thor is replaced by a fool. Someone who is aware that he is missing something and yearns for it, but can't go back to the way he was. An angry storm is a terrible thing. An angry storm god more so. Minotaur! Thor met with his mother Gaia and received her message. If the mortals of Earth could not change, if they would not cease their pollution, they would not survive. To force them to change, Gaia unleashed the elder gods who wreaked havoc upon humanity, innocent and guilty alike. But perhaps her son could be a more targeted force of change. Perhaps Thor could serve as Gaia's mercy. Thor believed he could, and he had a target in mind, Dario Agger. Have you the slightest idea how many laws you're currently breaking, I wonder? Those elevator doors were real gold, you know. Inlaid with diamonds from my private mine. Gold and diamonds, you say? And what is your desk made of? Finest Brazilian mahogany. Finest matchwood. You should understand the limits of your mortal laws, for I obey them as a courtesy, and only when they serve justice. And you are a fine one to talk of damage as you poison the earth itself. As Midgard's child, the true son of the soil, I will tell you plain, creature, my mother is ill-pleased with thee. This was a fun interaction, and I also like the aside that Thor only obeys the laws of man out of respect for them. But he's not above tossing them aside if he feels strongly enough about it. Agger muses that he should make the next desk out of California redwood, and warns Thor that he's letting his temper get the best of him. Thor warns that his wrath is nothing compared to Gaia's, and due to the greed of people like Dario, she has unlocked the door to the end of the world. The Minotaur laughs. The end of the world? Don't threaten me with a good time. The air burned. The land was desolate, leeched of life. An angry storm is a terrible thing. A dead storm more so. Thor looks on in horror as the Minotaur welcomes him to the future. Agger explains that this is a hologram, a proof of concept, but Thor notes that no mortal projection could make a god sweat. Something isn't right, but he couldn't think of what that might be. He instinctively put his hand to his axe, Tormod, and the axe felt heavy in his hand. Dario explains that after the human race has been downsized, pruned, it will look like this, the Rockstone. The outside is impenetrable, and the inside is an exclusive climate-controlled paradise for select Roxxon customers. A ruling class will be established with life support linked to the premium customers so the rest will know their place and serve. That's the sales pitch for the billion-dollar suckers anyway. Ager has no intention of living in the Rockstone, and will instead go to some other world, starting it over in his own image. Thor asks him why he kills his own planet for coin. Dario ponders for a moment what he should say. He could make a speech. He could blame his tragic childhood or revenge. But the truth, Thor? Absolute and unvarnished? I like it when the number goes up. That's all. Because that means I win. That means I'm better. And that's all there is. Dario Agger is one of the most selfish Thor characters ever, and this is our clearest look at who he is and what makes him tick. He's an all-consuming bastion of greed who is incapable of being satisfied. He's not unaware of what his exploitation of the planet will do. He knows and he doesn't care. All he cares about is the bottom line. He doesn't care about his employees or even his most loyal customers. He provides premium Roxxon customers with what he presents as the perfect product to avoid the end of the world, and he calls them suckers for accepting it. Dario tells Thor to think fast. The Executioner's axe buries itself into the Thunder God's back. Thor was warned that Skurge had returned, but is shocked that he's working for the Minotaur. And disappointed. Skurge is disappointed too. The carbon steel axe that the Minotaur made him is no match for Mjolnir. Still, Skurge uses the leverage to twist the hammer out of Thor's hand before he can think. Both fighters still have other weapons, though. Thor, his axe, Tormod, and Skurge, his fists. But once again, Thor was too slow, and Skurge's greatest blow sends the Odinson flying right out of the illusion. As Thor falls, he notes that Skurge has become stronger and quicker, while Thor has become sluggish, stumbling from one error to another. Thor came here with no plan and easily fell into Agger's. When did he become so foolish? He is surrounded by clues, yet he cannot see the obvious. Mjolnir, my hammer! Tormod, my axe, to me! Mjolnir returns, but Tormod does not obey. It is now in Skurge's hands, who suggests that Thor put an inscription on it so people will know how it works. Whosoever holds this axe, if they be wise, shall possess the axe of Thor. Skurge only became truly wise when he stood alone at Galabru. On that day, he stole Thor's death, and now he wants it back. His dreams foretold a prophecy of doom for whoever carries Thor's godly weapons, so Skurge will carry them, and save Thor from the doom that comes with them. Thor, for lack of a better word, is becoming dumber. He's not thinking as quickly as he used to, and that's giving Skurge the advantage. Thor also just noticed how foolish it was to come here without a plan. Thor has dealt with the Minotaur before, and he knows how incredibly resourceful he can be. He was told by Gaia that he needs to stop the polluters of Earth, so he just blindly rushes the biggest polluter he knows. This is not smart. There is a purpose to Thor's enemies making him dumber. We learn that Tormod, Thor's new weapon, has its own requirements to wield it. Whereas with Mjolnir you need to be worthy, with Tormod you need to be wise. This is why Thor noticed that Tormod is getting heavier, and why it chooses to disobey Thor and instead allow the much wiser Skurge to lift it. Thor is being made less wise so that Skurge can take the axe from him and fulfill the prophecy of Thor's doom. In Avengers Incorporated number 3, it's revealed that Skurge dreamt that a doom would befall the one who wielded Thor's weapons, so Odin sent Skurge out of Valhalla in order to prevent this. Thor does not fully understand his words, but since Skurge is outside of Valhalla, he is a citizen of Asgard once more, and thus the responsibility of the Allfather. And Thor will not allow any Asgardian to meet death without a fight. And while an angry storm is a terrible thing, an angry enchantress is more so. Amora calls Thor a liar. He let Skurge die, and Heimdall was the only one to comfort her. Skurge is glad someone was there for her, and asks whatever happened to him. "Oh, Skurge, you big silly. He was allowed to meet his death, of course, stabbed in the back by a mere mortal. And where was Thor? Oh, busy, busy." Amora's children, dear Alvi and dear Eirik, were kind to her after that. Eirik was murdered by a fellow student at a magic school. Where was Thor? Busy, busy, busy. There was a truth in her words, one that stung Thor's very heart. But he had spoken true as well, and he would not give up the fight. Amora the Enchantress has entered the battle, and we now might have a better idea of what her motivations are. She lays the blame for 3 Asgardian deaths at Thor's feet. The first is Skurge's sacrifice on the Galabru Bridge in Thor number 362. The second is the death of Heimdall, who was killed by Bullseye with the Dragonfang sword in Valkyrie Jane Foster number 2. As a side note, I really do like that Ewing mentioned Heimdall comforting Amora in the Simonson run. It's a nice little detail that makes her anger over his death more believable. The final death is the death of Amora's own son, Eirik. Eirik and Alvis are the sons of Amora and a palace guard named Bror. They attended the Strange Academy, but Eirik sacrificed himself in order to save the life of his classmate in Strange Academy Finals number 6. All 3 lives lost were very important to Amora, so it makes sense that this is the reason why she's going to do this to Thor. However, I don't think she's being genuine. Based on his comments, Skurge also seems to be blaming Thor for these deaths, but we know that he's trying to help Thor. Amora is on Skurge's side, and she's trying to help him prevent Thor's death by blaming Thor for these deaths. She's either trying to convince him that Thor letting others die is something he's done before, so he shouldn't be concerned about doing it now, or she's trying to convince him that he's unworthy of Mjolnir. The prophecy is linked to the god who wields Thor's weapons. They already have Tormod, but they need to get him to give up Mjolnir in order to make it apply to Skurge. And if you're sick of unworthy storylines, don't worry. Ewing has already explicitly confirmed multiple times that he won't be doing one. If Amora wants to make him unworthy, she will fail. The illusion returns. Thor tries to keep his wits about him, but there is a fog upon his mind. Tormod, the axe that signifies keen wit, is no longer obedient to him. His thoughts are clumsy, and so is he. This is your doing, Amora. Thor demands to know what magic she has weaved upon him. The oldest magic, she says, the secret fire that Ullr lit and his brother Bragi sang at. The telling fire. As gods, they are susceptible to that kind of magic. Their tale is as much a part of them as bone and blood, or the thread of their fates. For the gods, it is truly the magic art. Art. I never liked that word. I prefer content. It's the unit of product and the feeling you sell with it. Are you content now, Thor? Thor swears he will kill Dario. No, I'm meeting death. Skurge has the axe and now all he needs is the hammer. He tells Thor to give it to him so he can take his place. No! Never! If death waits, it waits for me, and I will fight it back. For the Thunder God bows to none! The thread of my fate is my own, Skurge. My tale is my own! That's just classic Thor. Facing impossible odds even if it seems hopeless, not just facing it, but resolving to fight back. It reminds me of the classic moment from Thor number 300, where he faces against the Celestials, and even though it's clear he doesn't stand a chance, Thor fights back until the very last moment. Dario Agger was making a joke earlier, a pun. Thor's tale is not his own, not on Earth. Are you content, Thor? He presents a strange comic book to Thor. Some time ago, Thor made an error. He allowed people to publish his adventures, to make comic books of his exploits. At the time, it seemed simple enough. He signed the story rights away and donated the profits to charity. But it's not just ink on paper now. These days, it's not just a story. It's a movie, a toy, a cake topper, an entire corporate machine. Agar bought the machine. He bought the Thor franchise, and it brings him power. It makes the number go up, but the Enchantress was able to use it for more. She doesn't have Loki's innate gift for story magic, but what she lacks in finesse, she makes up for in volume. Millions of mortals will read this comic, on paper, on free websites, a panel at a time on social media, probably even on niche Thor YouTube channels. All of that creates a spell large enough to affect even an Allfather. Now, Thor's story on Midgard is one of an oaf, a fool. It's no wonder Thor has become so befuddled. It's like an infection that he constantly has to fight off on Midgard. She whispers in his ear to take it. Take the comic book. Thor knows it's a distraction, a trap. She reassures him he'll be fine. He should read it. And so, the enchanted Thor did. And to dive into a story is not so terrible a thing, but when the story climbs out, is more so. The Retconned Thor has arrived, and this feels like it might be a critique of some of the more recent Thor portrayals. This Retconned Thor that Amora has shown to the world, and that Thor may be turning into, is described as a bit of a dumb oaf. A version of Thor projected to the masses that changes the way Thor is perceived. I remember after Ragnarok came out, I noticed a lot of people seemed to think Thor was really dumb, and this could be a reflection of that. Just recently, Avengers writer Jed MacKay was asked why he had Thor using cunning and deductive reasoning in battle, since he wasn't really known for it. And MacKay had to defend Thor, saying he wouldn't be around for thousands of years without being pretty sharp. It could just be a coincidence, since Tormund is linked to Thor's wit, and making him dumber would be a good way to get the axe away from Thor. But there is clearly some sort of critique directed at the way Marvel franchises are treated. They are no longer just selling a comic book with a story, but they're also selling movie tickets, cake toppers, and toys. Things that only suckers obsessed with Thor would waste their money buying hundreds of. I'm part of the problem. Thor has never been a comedic character, but Thor the Dark World didn't do as well as Marvel liked, and Guardians of the Galaxy did, so Thor's now a comedic oaf. There's a lot riding on a successful Thor story, so the story and characters are changed to make sure the numbers go up as much as possible. Regardless of whether or not it's a parody of the Love and Thunder Thor, Amora does give more details on how she pulled this off. She used story magic, which we saw her use in issue 7. And Agar's ownership of the Thor franchise allowed her to use it so effectively. Now, story magic does seem ridiculously overpowered, since apparently comic book publishers can topple gods, but there are important stipulations and limits in place. The comic itself did not change Thor, but the spell did, and the comic being viewed by millions gave Amora the power to cast it. It is also only effective on Midgard, since that's the only place where Thor's new story is being read. It also is uniquely effective against gods, since they are naturally creatures of stories. All in all, this was yet another great Immortal Thor issue. Ibrahim Robertson is doing a phenomenal job filling in. This panel in particular was my favorite, but the art was great throughout. Ewing nails the smaller details of Thor, portraying him as a character who stands defiantly against impossible odds, and also showing how Thor treats mortal laws. It was great to see the Executioner and the Enchantress together again, but I don't know how well their plan is going to go. Skurge may want to die for Thor, but Thor won't let it happen without a fight. Well, that's all for this episode of Thor Talk, and I hope you enjoyed it. What did you think of it, and do you think that Ewing had the MCU in mind with the Retconned Thor, or is it just a coincidence? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. With that being said, see you next time on Thor Talk, where...
You behold in breathless wonder